Howdy, I'm Kate Kavanaugh, and you're listening to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast, where we're laying the groundwork for our land, ourselves, and for generations to come by looking at the way every thread of life is connected to one another. Communities above ground mirror the communities below the soil, which mirror the vast community of the cosmos. As the saying goes, as above, so below. Join me as we take a curious journey into agriculture, biology, history, spirituality, health, and so much more. I can't wait to unearth all of these incredible topics alongside you. Hello, and welcome to the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast, which I think is in transition to the Groundwork podcast. How many times am I going to say that? Do you believe me yet? I am your host, Kate Kavanaugh, and we are here to explore the threads of what it means to be humans woven into this earth. And today's guest, Bonnie Tsui, whose book On Muscle, The Stuff That Moves Us and Why It Matters, is out today. And this has become an increasingly more important interview to me, and I hope that you'll stick around to hear my introduction about why. As many of you know, I have been an avid hiker and long distance walker most of my life, and taught yoga. I've always loved movement, but about 9 months ago, I started really lifting weights. It's something that I had done here and there, but I hadn't really committed to a practice. And I committed to a practice, which is something that I shared about in last week's episode, kind of exploring my own movement and my own act of building muscle and why it matters to me. And it really surprised me in just about every way. It surprised me in how much my body shifted and changed, in the sense of ease that I found in farming, in walking and hiking, in everyday activities in the kitchen. And it also surprised me in terms of what it taught me about my inner life. And so with that, I want to read two little pieces from Bonnie's On Muscle before I continue this story. She says, quote, "Every push-up was a note to yourself that you were capable of more than you were the day before. These days, when so much of life feels out of our control, something that concrete and tangible, however incremental, feels like a small victory. During the writing of this book, I've been doing a lot of push-ups and thinking about what it means to do them. Lately, I've come to understand that what I learned from my father was not just to lift heavy things, but to lift myself." Okay, here's the next quote from Bonnie. "For all its nobility, the pursuit of mightiness remains grounded in the body and all of its appetites. But the strength community's insatiable curiosity about the human body is something I find surprisingly moving. To know one's own strength. I've come to understand the meaning of these words not as a binary statement, an I do or an I don't, but as an ongoing process of discovery. Muscles matter. They allow us, in an observable way, to see what we can do. Though you may not initially know what you're capable of, you have vast reservoirs of potential waiting to be tapped for just the right moment to be revealed." Wow. I think that this is such a beautiful sample of what is in store for all of you that are going to pick up Bonnie's book. And I know that after this interview, that will be all of you because it is amazing. As are her other books, Why We Swim, American Chinatown, and her children's book, Sarah and the Big Wave. We talk a little bit about Why We Swim in this interview because it just made such a big impact on me. But I want to talk a little bit about, I lift weights for a lot of reasons, to be able to age well and to have agency as I age, to be able to farm with more ease and longer, to know that if I were to have children and it would be a little bit later in life, that I could show up for them as completely as I possibly could. I lift for my health, and I lift to enjoy the body that I live in, especially as somebody that suffers with a chronic illness. The act of lifting feels like a co creation with a body that I am often at odds with. But this last piece I don't think I was aware of, and I lift to remind myself that I can pick up heavy things, that when life gives me a load, that I know how to do exercise, to do life loaded. And to remind myself what it means to show up and trust myself to show up, rep after rep when the going gets hard. And so, with that, I'm going to share something a little bit vulnerable. This past week, and I shared a little bit more about this in my movement episode. This past week, my husband lost his job and we lost our primary source of income. And there are a lot of ideas for how my life is going to shift very dramatically. And I realized that one of the things that I had been training for was this exact moment that I know I am capable of lifting heavy things, right? And I'll come back to Bonnie. Every push up was a note to yourself that you were capable of more than you were the day before. And this has helped me feel so capable. And that word actually has shown up for me year after year in something that I really want to cultivate for myself. And I have a lot in process, but I want to do a big ask. And that ask is, if this podcast has mattered to you, if these explorations have connected with you in any way, and you have the space to give a little bit, there are links to several different resources in the show notes in which to become a subscriber. And at this time, I will build out some benefits for subscribers. But right now, I'm asking for it just to be for the pleasure of listening to this podcast, not for stickers, not for a Zoom Q&A, not for an adless episode, because right now I can't put more on my plate. And I hope that you will understand that. There's more writing coming to the Substack. There's more coming to the Patreon. And if you just want to give a one-time gift, I have a link to my PayPal as well. Please note that my real name is Catherine Dittmer. It's the only time you'll ever hear me say that. This is a hard ask. And I only want you to give it if it's something that you feel able, but I haven't asked for much for this podcast, and I am asking now. This is a part of our effort to stay on the farm. And what I'll tell you is that where I am right now is that life has blown me wide open, and I am open to what comes. And I think a big part of that is because of the resiliency that movement has given me in my life. And so it is with a great sense of just how much this book has meant to me. I did some push-ups before this episode, before this intro, and as Bonnie will share with us, push-ups were at one point called kissing the ground in equilibrium when she went back to try to find the origins of a push-up. And I also want to say, I think I fangirled a little bit in this episode. I think I've been doing that a little bit in interviews, and I feel a little self-conscious about it, but I'm a fan of a lot of people, and I think it's okay for that to come through. I think sometimes we're missing just pure appreciation in our work, and I'm happy to be the one to give that to people, even if it's a little bit embarrassing to then launch it on a podcast. So I just think Bonnie is incredible. And after I read On Muscle, I knew I had to read Why We Swim. American Chinatown is on my nightstand and ready to go. I think she's amazing. I do want to tell you that you need to stick around to the end of this episode because we talk about whale peduncles and you need to know what that is. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart our sponsor, Redmond Real Salt, for bringing us something salty with which to move our bodies. Their Relight hydration powder feels like the perfect thing for this podcast, but salt is a really important part of how muscles move. And so this is a shout out to Redmond. You can get 15% off using the code mindbodysoil_15 when you go to redmond.life. And we have some other sponsors. That is also a great way to support this podcast, which is by purchasing through my sponsorship or affiliate links. You get to support some cool companies and support me at the same time. Other way to support that is totally free, no charge to you, and really does make a big difference is to follow and subscribe to this podcast and to leave a rating and review so that others find it too. That helps people find my work, and that is a no-cost way to give me support I really need right now, if I'm being honest. Okay, with that, I give you the absolutely incredible interview that I did with Bonnie Tsui and her book On Muscle, The Stuff That Moves Us and Why It Matters, which is out today wherever you buy books or audiobooks. Having one of your illustrations right there
It
in
really,
the
it
book.
really meant a lot to me to be able to do that, to do a few illustrations and have those included in the book because, I mean, as you know from reading the book, that art has been such a big part of my life since as long as I can remember because of my dad. And so um, I think being able to have um, that piece of myself and my upbringing, I guess, in there was really important to me.
Yeah, it was wonderful to see as a reader. And I mean, I have to say, in reading this, I began to think of it in two ways. One is sort of a braid, and one is kind of a compound movement in weightlifting. That you
Oh,
had
I love
these,
that.
these three storylines coming together, that you had some science around strength and muscle, and then you have these beautiful stories that you're telling around these five themes of strength, form, action, flexibility, and endurance. And within that, you're weaving in your own story, and you do it in a way that has a beautiful flow, and it's completely seamless and just brings us into this very different notion of strength. And so I just wanted to say that at the outset.
Oh, thank you. You know what? I'm so, you gave me a little tingle in my heart because, I think you really get the book and what I was trying to do. And this is the beginning of this whole process of like now putting this book that I've been sitting with for the last few years into the world. And so to hear you, um, tell me that this was something that you received is just, it really means a lot. So thank you for saying that.
I received it and it delighted me. I actually made my way back to Why We Swim, and I couldn't get enough of being in this way that you write things and the way that you infuse your story into it. Just
It is so funny because you would think, and people have asked me this about Why We Swim and the structure of the book and how it all holds together, and people have asked me, oh, was it easier to go into On Muscle this time? And I
mm.
said, you'd really think so, but it wasn't because you still have to even though you've got to figure out the questions and the themes and how it all hangs together and how it and even though I knew I wanted to include these stories of both characters and people who real life people who have incredible gripping tales, true life tales, with the science, with the culture, with the personal threads, and just moments of like very much sensory exploration and examination and experience. Even though I knew all of that going in, I had to still do it. I had to still figure it out and who was going to be included and and how the stories all hung together. And I keep going back to this phrase, a heavy lift. I keep saying that to myself because
Mhm.
it totally felt like that at the same time that there were the moments of grace and the moments of weightlessness and you know, euphoria and effervescence. I do think, and weightlessness, right? Like the sort of idea of like jumping and leaving the earth. Like I do think that I love talking about the book now now that it's done, I can look back and say very honestly that sometimes it did feel really difficult to figure out.
Mm. I love that you went right back into that metaphor. I mean, it's so much laced in the way that we use muscle to talk about language is
Yes,
is a
yeah.
real touch point in the book that this was a heavy lift for you, and in that sort
Hmm.
of euphoric feeling that you have in any physical activity of using muscle, there is also, I mean, at times there's grueling and there's
Yeah.
muscling through. There's a sort
Hmm.
of gritting through it. And
Hmm.
so I
hmm
appreciate that it was both of those things.
Yeah. And I think the linguistic literary part that you're referring to, I just get so um lit up talking about that because it was something that I noticed right from the outset, and I knew that I wanted to explore the metaphor of muscle as much as the stuff of muscle. And I think that's why I had that subtitle, it's on muscle, but it's the stuff that moves us and why it matters. And there's different ways of, you think about it is the stuff that moves us, but also when you are moved by something, it is about your experience of transcendence and feeling, right? And experience as a human being in the world of like what makes life worth living. And I think that the braiding and interplay of those two things is what makes this book special to me and why and what I wanted to do with it. And so, of course, the wordplay is just, I mean, I love all the ways that we kind of, our language betrays our thoughts.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, like that's why the themes are that I settled on these characteristics of muscle that we kind of attribute to human, that we want to strive for as people is, strength and the perfect form and the ideal form and holding perfect form and action and being a person of action and being flexible and enduring, right? So I think that those all those uh, very specific characteristics of muscle itself, the stuff of
Mhm.
muscle, the tangible stuff, is also very much like this. There's the palimpsest of the layering of the
Mm.
meaning and the metaphor and the literary stuff, and also like how we talk about ourselves.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Bonnie Tsui about her new book on muscle. It's a powerful exploration of the body's strength and its connection to what matters most in life. Bonnie and I dove deep into the power of muscle in this episode, and it got me thinking about salt. Because the truth is, when aren't I thinking about salt? Redmond Real Salt has been a staple in my kitchen for over 7 years. Their salt isn't just about incredible flavor, though it tastes great, it's about nourishing your body. It's mined right here in the USA from the ancient Sundance Sea, and it is packed with 60 plus trace minerals, which are crucial for everything from muscle contraction to fluid balance and cellular processes. If you're serious about fueling your muscles, I also depend on their Relight hydration powder to replenish electrolytes like sodium, potassium, magnesium, and they use a very bioavailable magnesium glycinate, all of which are essential for recovery and performance, not to mention all of those trace minerals. I've also been using their pre workout before lifting in my home gym to ensure I'm properly energized and kind of playing around with what that might feel like. So, whether you're cooking up a hearty meal, hydrating before a workout, or preparing to move some heavy weight, Redmond Real Salt helps keep muscles functioning amazing and keeping you fueled. You can get 15% off your order at redmond.life using the code mindbodysoil_15. Again, that's redmond.life, code mindbodysoil_15, or just hit the link in the show notes, y'all. Now, back to Bonnie. Yeah. Yeah, I pulled a quote here and you said, the effect of this muscle exploration is that I've had to participate in my own studies of character, strength, form, action, flexibility, endurance. All of these are qualities of muscle that we strive for in personhood. The constant telescoping between the physical and the philosophical is revealing. And there was this tension between those
Hmm.
two spaces, that the stuff
Hmm.
that moves us is as corporeal corporeal as it is emotional, as it is
Right.
the issues that matter to us, as it is the other people and the humans that matter to us, our
Mm-hmm.
communities that move us,
So
our
much.
our joy that moves us, and our grief too.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved having that tension in there. I wonder actually if you'd jump into the deep end of the pool with me, kind of
Sure.
quickly, because there
I'm
was
ready.
something that you're ready. There was something that really struck me in the book, and then coming back to why we swim, there's this tension between life and death, but I noticed that in On Muscle, there's a little bit of a tension too, and it might have just been where I was in reading it, but
Mm-hmm.
there was this tension between how muscle brings us into a great sense of aliveness and
Mm-hmm.
of presence in our bodies,
Mm-hmm.
but there is also the tension of loss and the
Mm.
metamorphosis that time brings into our bodies and the inevitability of our bodies and our muscles ceasing and our own death,
Yes.
and I just I that part of it really spoke to me, and I'm sure it was intentional, and I just wonder if you could speak to that a little bit more.
Sure. I, as you can tell from what you just said, I have a preoccupation with death
You and me
and
both.
the and decay, and
You and me
it's
both.
part. Yeah, it's a part of embracing this life that we have that's so precious. Is that, of course, that it inevitably ceases. And so I think you are very, very perceptive in that with both Why We Swim and On Muscle, this is a preoccupation of mine. So, as much as I talk about the weightlessness, I talk about the sinking. As much as I talk about the animated aliveness, I also talk about the when your heart stops beating, when your muscle, when you lose your muscle over time and over your life,
Mhm,
which is a natural process, and when all of the when we die, like these, this, I think in the form section of the book, I talk about how when a body ceases to be alive, when rigor mortis sets in, it's like the same stuff that animates us in life arrests us in death, like ATP, like is what allows our muscles to move and have the energy to move when we're alive, and yet that's what also causes us um, to be rigid, to like, it's these biological processes are so um so much both a part of life and death, and so I yeah, like the interplay of those two things is definitely something that I think about a lot, and I wanted to write about in a way that we could all understand and access, and not be afraid of as much. I think because I mean, there's so much to be afraid of, right? And
yeah,
so I think as a child, I've written about this before, where I really was like, when confronted with death at a young age, I was really scared of it, and so
me too.
I think that I've always been wanting to examine that in a way that is useful, right? So,
Mhm,
and of course, now that I have kids, I want to be able to talk to them. And I think I have at least succeeded in this in part because I remember what it was like to think about these things as a child in various
mhm,
stages of my growing up and into adulthood, um, and 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 wanting both the knowledge but also the comfort and security of someone who was close to me to hold my hand through that thought process, right? So you're not going to tell a kid, you're not going to lie to them and say, you will never die. But you also want to give them something to hold on to that propels them hopefully through life, and I think, and that is part of it being like this cycle and this circle that keeps going on and on and on. And so like it's all related. So like when we die, we go back in, we're all these molecules like kind of, I think that
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying here, which is that,
They're borrowed. We just sort of
yeah,
borrow the constituent components of our body for this
yes,
this one moment where we are animated and electrified, and then
yes.
they dissolve back into the nutrient cycle.
Right. And the beauty, I think, of that is to know that that we continue in that way. It's
Mhm.
not that we are, living forever in the same state that we are now, but that we live on in a different form. And so I think there's some comfort in that, and that has been, since time immemorial. So I think, yeah, and I do think that definitely informs my work in some way, in
Yeah,
in
I
not in some way, in a big way.
yeah, I thought it was really beautiful as somebody who also has sought to better understand or touch or peek around the curtain of death because of a deep childhood fear, and also curiosity. And I think that you traverse not just, what you call, building up and breaking down, right? This constant cycle that we and our muscles too exist in. But you also talk about the metamorphosis of bodies, both of the potential of muscle, but of bodies through time and
Hmm.
at different ages and through different injuries and through different stimuli and emotions. And I found something deeply sort of normalizing about it in the most delicious way, right? Like to that there was strength for everyone within it, and getting to see how transformative our bodies are and can be. As I was reflecting on muscle and movement in today's episode with Bonnie Tsui for her book on muscle, I couldn't help but think about one of the places I move the most: the kitchen. This is where I lift, bend, squat, reach, and press. To be honest, I may have picked up a pan instead of a kettlebell for a workout or two. Field Company cast iron has been a staple in my kitchen for years, paradoxically, because it's so light. If you're like me and you love cooking with cast iron, you'll appreciate the smooth bottoms and lightweight design that Field Company brings to the table. Their pans feel like vintage thanks to their small batch, US made process using recycled iron that will last generations. It's not just about durability, though, it's about creating a connection with the food that you're cooking. Right now, I'm loving my two handled skillet for packing to the brim with ground meats, chickens, and I'm looking forward to more of those first greens of spring in my 7-inch skillet. Field Company is offering listeners of the show 10% off when you go to fieldcompany.com/Kate_Kavanaugh, or just hit the link in the show notes. Trust me, once you try Field Co., your kitchen will never feel the same. Now, back to Bonnie.
I mean, thank you for that. I do, I'm amazed by muscle. Like, I'm amazed by our bodies, and I'm amazed by the specific, particular quality of muscle that it has, the remarkable ability it has to change. And I think that is, um, itself very inspiring. Like that we we often think, I think, when we get to a certain age that we're, and the word that came to mind is ossified. And so it's funny because like bone is
Mhm.
right, it's like harder. And but we think about muscle, and the reality is that muscle is flexible. It has, as a tissue, it's like quite possibly, the most adaptable tissue in our bodies. And it's like moment to moment changing, responding to, changes in the environment and sort of what is required of us to respond to that. And I find that really amazing and great. And so, like, and it inspires me to kind of think about, well, how not just like physically rising to the challenge of like continuing each day to try something different, or continue to um, to get stronger or more flexible or try a new movement because I know that it's not the end. Like you can keep doing this well into I mean, really up until you die. Like the day that you can,
Yeah.
you will keep, you have the ability to keep changing and growing and trying new things and muscles. Like the way, I guess what I'm saying is like from a purely scientific biological standpoint, like there are lots and lots of studies and research that now support that even if you start exercising at a in your 70s, say, like, and you've never picked up a weight until then, you can still get the benefits from that. Your body will change, your muscles will grow, you will be stronger, you will be healthier. All these physiological changes happen to make it so. And it's not that you have to say, okay, I am now like 35 years old and I cannot be, I mean, it's like absurd. Even though, like, at age 30, it is true that like the process of, age related muscle loss, which is called sarcopenia, like, even though that starts then in our 30s, that, and I know that is such a terrible thing to hear.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I'm there. I'm right in the middle, right in the middle of that, and I think
So,
about it often.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's something that we can shift and change,
yeah,
that
yes,
we have this, capability of preserving and
yes,
building muscle even,
yeah,
into subsequent decades.
exactly.
Yeah. And within this, you have stories of people that come to activity, including you. You learned to surf at age 30 or in your 30s. Um,
Like my late 20s. I think I was probably like 29 or something like that, 28 maybe.
yeah, I mean, these
Yeah.
are stories of the resilience of coming to movement later in life, but also coming
Mhm.
back to movement.
Mhm.
I was really struck by Ebony Ingram and coming
Mhm.
back to jumping
Yes.
after cancer, right? And
Yes.
that even as our bodies transform through injury and illness,
Mhm.
there is still this potential there, especially
Yeah,
when
and
there is joy there too.
for sure. And I think that it is also it's not just about going forward, but it's about muscle memory and about what persists of who you are, where you found joy. And so, especially, particularly with that story about Ebony, and that's on a section of the book. The theme is action, and it's about jumping and double dutch. And so, that her story as someone who is a dancer and choreographer and grew up jumping double dutch with her sisters and cousins, and then when she became an adult and went to college, that she still did that. And she called, when she was telling me the story of how, um, when she first moved to DC, and she was just like, we went to a park and started playing double dutch, right? And I love that she called playing double dutch because it is play. It is movement as play, and that people were jumping out of their cars to play with them, like, and this is not kids, this is a grown people, grown adults who wanted to participate in the joy that it is two people turning the ropes for you and you jumping in, and like that dance and that joy and the rhymes and the just you cannot not feel happiness seeing this, and you cannot
Yeah.
feel this bubbling up inside and like the smile on your face to watch it, and also like there is that tug of like, it's an invitation to come in even though you're scared of like the two ropes, like, I mean,
I
and
could feel it. I could feel what that felt like as a kid. I haven't done
yeah.
it since I was a kid, but I could feel the
Yeah, and the first time I did that, I was really terrified because I was, you're in front of all these people, you're scared of messing up, and you have to trust the people who are turning the ropes. And when you're in there, it's like, it's so so fun. I mean, I'm like, again, I get like kind of tingles like thinking about it, and just like we could not stop laughing. Like it just was
Mm.
so much delight. And I think like if you have something like that in your life that you can have and access so easily, you know, whether it's surfing or swimming or jumping double dutch or riding a bike. I mean, like, why wouldn't you do that? You know,
Yeah.
practicing yoga, anything. Like, and so I think what I wanted to capture in the book was a sense of that joy and levity and the feeling and the reminder of like when you're a kid, um, that that feeling of play is something that we can access throughout our lives. You know, and I wrote about this a lot in Why We Swim because I think water is one of those elements and one of those places in which it does make it easily accessible for people,
Play.
because they
Yeah.
when you get in it, right, it's transforming you and taking quite literally taking you out of your element so that you can be a little
Mm.
different. You can be
Hmm.
not in your normal routine. And so I do love that water encourages play like that.
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about every time there's a rock quarry near where we live that my husband and I go to in the summertime,
Oh,
here
yay.
in the Southern Adirondacks, and
Uh-huh.
the second we get in the water, you feel like a child. Play
Yes.
is very accessible from that space, but I think that's true of many physical activities that
Yeah.
it brings us back into a more childlike frame of mind that allows
Right.
us to be a little silly, a little have some more levity.
I was thinking about rock quarries and how it's like jumping, you know, and like
Mhm,
taking a risk
mhm,
by jumping in and
yeah,
like, are you
little
going to
bit of
jump in
fear.
from a higher rock? Yeah, exactly. And you're
Mhm,
kind of like, ooh, and but it's like a small way of experiencing that, pushing yourself to
mm,
um, do something that's momentarily scary. Like it's not,
mhm.
it, you know, I mean, hopefully you're jumping into the rock, like you know how to swim. You know you're with someone who's with you know like so it's what I'm saying is like in this experience like it's circumscribed. It's a it's a known thing.
Yeah,
So if you but you can still experience that feeling of like bubbliness and a little bit of like tinged with fear.
mm,
That is part, I mean, that is part of like what
part of
makes it
it.
fun, right?
Yeah,
It's like a little bit of
absolutely.
risk.
I hope you're enjoying this conversation with Bonnie Tsui about her new book on muscle and the fascinating connection she draws between our body and what matters the most to us. Speaking of connections, I want to take a moment to talk about Baha'i grounded footwear, which have become extensions of my feet. I take them on walks, on hikes, and I've actually been loving their Rediscover hiking boots for farm work. Baha'i shoes are designed to keep you grounded by allowing the electrons from the earth to flow through the shoe and into your body. I have spent over 400 miles in these shoes, and I can confidently say they're all I wear. They offer a wide footbed, flexible sole, and a zero drop, making them a perfect fit for the way our bodies were meant to move. They also have a running shoe with a little bit of a drop if that's something that you prefer. You can get 10% when you go to Bahae, that's BAHE.co, and use the code KATE10 at checkout. When you support Bahae, you're supporting this podcast as well. Now, back to Bonnie.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that. As a kid, I wasn't a risk taker physically
Hmm.
at all.
Yeah.
I was a very timid kid, and as an adult,
Uh-huh.
it's very different for me. I never would have jumped, and I still find a lot of reticence and fear in jumping off the cliffs at the quarry. And
It's
when I
scary.
go home after I've done it, I just feel this sense of elation and
Yeah.
satisfaction. And I know that for me, so much of, and this was really echoed in the book for me, so much of physical practice for me, right? I'm an endurance hiker, I lift weights, is about
Hmm.
accessing my more philosophical, like it's about exploring emotion
Yeah.
for me and
Yeah.
about exploring sort of inner terrain as I explore the outer terrain of where I live, and the
Hmm.
book speaks to some of emotion as action too, and so that I started to view it as a little bit of a cycle that our emotions are these actions, and there is
Yes.
also action that takes us back into our our emotional being through the physical.
Yeah, it was super interesting to hear uh, Dacher Keltner, um, the scientist and writer and author, talk about emotions being about action and like um, and like exerting that outward,
I have the
like
quote
that.
here if it's
Yeah.
helpful.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I do. I think it's at least close to it. You say, "There are certain emotions that are more about the body," he tells me. Joy, for example, which often involves jumping, or love, which is about embracing, postural movements. Emotions are about action and the preparation and intention for action. I'd never considered feelings as action oriented, but once I do, I see it everywhere. The Dutch social psychologist Batja Mesquita has said that emotions can be thought of as relational acts between people rather than as simply mental states that reside within us. I loved
Yeah. I
that.
mean, I was so, it was really, like that kind of like little like um, turn of how to think about emotions as related to our bodies and action was really eye-opening for me. That it wasn't just about expressing what's inside, like in a an internal state. It's about um, like expressing that bodily to make something happen external to you, like and
Mhm,
connect with someone else,
mhm.
which I find again like really beautiful, like really telling, you know.
Yeah. I did too. There were two instances recently on the podcast different guests had brought up. One, Katie Bowman, who wrote a great book that you might enjoy called Movement Matters,
Hmm.
had said that hunger is actually a cue to move. That from an evolutionary biology standpoint, if you're hungry, it is a cue into the motion of going to procure
Mm,
food.
hmm. Hmm.
And I was so struck by that, and I was also struck I just interviewed Mary Frances O'Connor, she did a book about how grief is manifested in the body,
Mm, hmm.
and some of the scientific research around that, and that loneliness is a cue to move to move
Hmm.
towards people.
Towards people. Uh-huh.
And I was really
Yeah.
struck by that in reading the book, how much our emotions are cues to action and cues to connect with an action in our community. And I think that this is
Hmm.
something you cover really beautifully in the endurance chapter around Q, Q Stevens,
Coup,
Q,
yeah, Coup
Q
Stevens.
Stevens, and this sort of movement as endurance, movement as community, and movement as endurance of a deep sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I really found that part of the book so elucidating and specifically like thinking about, you know, Ku's journey and like what he felt moved to do from his personal story growing up in the Paiute Reservation in Nevada, and how and what lessons that have has for us, as
Yeah.
a society. I think so. The backstory is that um, Q Stevens grew up in Yerington, Nevada, and was a very gifted, or is as a young kid. Now he's in college at University of Oregon. As I is sort of like the big reveal in the book. He makes it to Tracktown, USA. That he was a very gifted runner, and so but also that running tied him to his ancestors. And that he was told when he was 8 years old by his father, Delmar Stevens, that his great grandfather um, escaped at that same age, at 8 years old, from a native boarding school, and he ran away and escaped 50 miles,
Yeah.
across the desert um, you know, from the boarding school to run home across, because he didn't want to be there. He wanted to be at home. He was a little boy, and like all he wanted to do was be with his family. And so, um, to be a little kid like that, and to want to return to your home and your family so desperately that you risk that, um, the the dangers of being in the scorching desert heat, um, and freezing nights, to do that, is just, and to do that not once, not twice, but three times until the boarding school authorities left him alone, is just, it's really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And also, it's just astonishing that he did that and then lived his life like, you know, grew up to be a rancher and a farmer, um,
Mm.
and a really respected elder in the Yarrington Paiute community, and had kids, and who had kids, and then like, and brings us to the present day, to Q. And I think for him to learn that and to grow up with that story, um, and also then to see how the traumas of that experience also reverberate through across generations, and not just in his family, but in his community and in the larger native community, across the United States and in Canada, where these boarding schools were, established over the last couple hundred years. And
Yeah.
so I thought it was like a regular practice to take children from their families, and to remove them from everything that's anchoring them, from their language, from the love of their family, from their culture, and all the practices that are home, and
Yeah.
then try to, it created such a huge trauma and rupture in Native life in our larger North American society, that is just still so evident today. And so I think, like, for Ku to figure out, like, that I'm going to run this run. And this is how I'm going to feel what this is, and teach other people about it. And no, I think it wasn't like always clear how it was going to go, but I think,
I think
this
it
run
rarely
was
is.
run.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think it rarely is. I think sometimes
Yeah.
it starts as almost an impulse sometimes, I think
Yeah. And
some of these ways in which
yeah,
we move.
exactly. And but he knew that that was important. He knew that he
Yeah.
wanted to do that and run that run, and trace his great grandfather's footsteps, um, and then other people wanted to do it with him. And so, like, I went and did. I participated in the third and final Remembrance Run, and it was just real. Like, I will never forget it. It was just an
Yeah.
extraordinary experience. It was an extraordinary experience to get to know and commune with the people who were on that run, came from many different places to participate in it. And I don't know, like, to be part of, like, this collective body running across 50 miles across the desert is really, it's extraordinary. Like, I think, read the book to find out really what the
Yeah.
details of what it was like, but I was changed by that very much.
Yeah. Hey, it's Kate, and this is a little ad for me, for this podcast. I want to say something really quickly. If you love this show, supporting the brands I partner with is one of the best ways to help me keep making it. Right now, I'm in a season where I'm carrying a lot, lifting heavy, as it were. When you use my affiliate links or check out the sponsors I genuinely love and use, you're helping me keep this work going. This podcast is not backed by a network. It's made by me. It's researched by me. The guests are pitched by me. These books are read by me. These interviews are formulated by me and not by AI. It is edited mostly by my husband. There are other ways to support me as well. In the show notes, you'll find links to my Patreon, to my Substack, and if you want to leave a one-time tip, there's a link for that as well. As always, one of the best and absolutely free ways to support this podcast is by hitting subscribe so you get the next episodes, and leaving a rating and review, and sharing an episode you love, like this one with Bonnie Tsui and her new book on muscle, with a friend or family member. Thank you, dear listener, for all of your support over the years. Now, back to Bonnie. I can only imagine that you were, and I'll say for listeners, touched very briefly on this topic of boarding schools. I interviewed Rebecca Claren, whose book "The Cost of Free Land" is an excellent one look at this. But I was struck too about how what often moves us, right? It is like these are muscles move us,
Yeah.
and looking at this, it moves us to move. And I saw that too in Why We Swim with Kim, who organizes the swim around the
Mm,
Mexican-American border too.
yeah.
Right. I kind
Yeah.
of saw that echoed when I came back to Why We Swim, that
Oh my
there's
gosh,
this
I didn't
sense
even think
of
about that. Yeah.
yeah, and I pulled this quote from you that I really loved around it, because I think a lot about the muscle of community, what it means to build community nowadays. And you said, even as I chase the meaning of what it is to endure, I believe its highest form has to do with collective perseverance. To run with purpose can demonstrate resistance without violence. This is how you outlast those who would hurt you. To struggle through together also changes the nature of the suffering. It makes the struggle not yours, not mine, but ours. And I just thought about that the meaning of what muscle can be at a again, at that individual level, but also at that societal or community level, as we
Yeah.
come together to move.
Yeah. And so, to your point, it is about like physically putting yourself bodily into the game, right? To show that you care, that is one way in which we demonstrate to each other in community that we care. But it is also, again, like with the language, sort of betraying our thoughts and feelings is like we do talk about um, exercising muscles of empathy and connection and
Mhm.
community, and that's how we um, and we understand, I think, on an instinctive level that like it takes practice. Like you actually do need to um, exercise that ability to connect, and it is interesting how movement and moving together and moving collectively, collective movement, like as in dance or in a run, uh, has meaning for us. Like I think that like that coordinate and there's lots of interesting research around coordinated movement and movement as a group, how that um, what that does for us, socially, because we are social beings.
And
And
we're social beings in movement. We've been
yeah,
gathering
exactly.
and
I mean, that's
hunting
what's
and
so
walking
interesting.
together for
Yeah,
time immemorial.
yeah. So I think it's interesting to look at it through this, a scientific lens of examining, like, oh, what does that do for us? And how does it, how do our brains respond to it? How does our psychology, the psychology of our, brains, like what does that study tell us about what it means to us and how we feel while we're doing it? And yeah, like I think being able to connect all of these dots was very rewarding for me to do in this book, and it was also really hard
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you connect a lot of dots throughout this. I mean, and everything again, I wanna say everything weaves together with such I mean, it just flows. I wouldn't even notice when you had toggled between these sort of shifts between, sort of memoir, science, and story.
That means
You
it
know,
worked.
it
Yay.
worked, it worked so well. I know where I have two more little pieces I'd love to touch on, and one is a little bit self-serving, and you wrote something that I've been trying to say on the podcast for some time, and you wrote about it both for the New York Times and in this book. You wrote about your experience in swim locker rooms, and I think that something that the book did for me that I kind of hinted at was, I think a lot about humans outside of their herd, right? We're a herd animal. We used to be, like we were just saying, walking and talking and
Right.
gathering and hunting. And I think that we've lost in losing community and losing a sense of herd. There are these places that become these stand-in watering holes, and this
Hmm.
opportunity share in in movement like swimming, and to share especially a movement that captures so many different such a wide age range as swimming, and to be in the locker room and just experiencing a continuum of bodies. I know that you come back to this idea of continuums a couple of times throughout On Muscle, and I think I just needed to, in a self-serving way, thank you for sharing
Oh.
this beautiful experience that I truly think we're missing the opportunity to see bodies at all of these different stages and
Hmm.
in movement too.
Hmm.
And I think that you do this in this scene in the locker room, and you also do it writ large in the book as you explore different bodies through different illnesses, different injuries, and what strength can mean in different ways in those spaces. And I just think we're deeply missing that, and so I think I just wanted to thank you for bringing us into the
Oh.
locker room with you and into these different bodies.
I thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I know that we are deeply siloed in modern life, um, and like self-segregating
Mhm.
in many ways, perhaps more than at any point in history.
Think
And
so.
so, um, when we have the opportunity, say in the locker room, or in a in a sort of more everyday way, or larger, to think about how we connect to other people on the continuum of bodies and on the continuum of our arc of our lives and in the work that we do. Um, like we have to be connected. We have to seek the connection in order to go on and have a future. And I think that we don't um, realize that those connections can be made in very simple, everyday ways like that, in a way that maybe we don't have to try as hard to do. Like it doesn't have to be that difficult.
Mhm, mhm. It can be something
um,
that's more passive than active. It can be just sort of in the I don't know, not maybe not the everyday routine, but some of the routine actions in our lives.
yes. Yeah. And I think we all desperately want that and need it and don't necessarily know that we are longing for that, when it's not, when it's missing.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate that you think about this so deeply, because I do too.
I think about this a
Yeah.
lot, and the book really called it in for me too. Like, the book brought me into thinking more about it, and I also think that there's a gregariousness, a conviviality to you in the book
Hmm.
as you seek out all of these people and as you learn all of these things, and I think too I'm in the continuum of listening to Why We Swim and then reading on muscle, and so all of these interactions and experiences coming from you of these reaching out and connecting and telling these stories, they called me into that sense of what it means for us to seek out connection.
Hmm. I'm very glad. Thank you.
Yeah. I thought we might close up. It's funny, before the podcast, I always kind of sit and I think about who I'm about to interview, and I usually take a couple of breaths and sort of connect to them, which is pretty cheesy, but with you, I did something different. I did some push-ups.
Yeah.
And
That's
and
awesome.
I can't stop thinking about this as kissing the ground in equilibrium.
Oh, it's so good.
And
Yeah.
you have this great piece, right? There's this thematic element of metamorphosis throughout the book, but there's also this deep part about capability. And I pulled this quote from you about push-ups. And you say, every push-up was a note to yourself that you were capable of more than you were the day before. These days, when so much of life feels out of our control, something that concrete and tangible, however incremental, feels like a small victory. During the writing of this book, I've been doing a lot of push ups and thinking about what it means to do them. Lately, I've come to understand that what I learned from my father was not just to lift heavy things, but to lift myself. And I loved this because there is something about the incremental building of muscle and of strength, which is an adventure I've been on for the last year, that that really does make you feel a sense of capable in your own body.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
and to see change and to have that be made tangible, I think, in a way that sometimes it feels a little bit more esoteric, a little bit harder to grasp.
Hmm. Yeah. I think I, that is one really important takeaway that I would want for people to have from this book, which is that we are all capable of that. And it doesn't have to be big and huge, this change right away, because that's not what is happens in life. Like
Yeah.
it's about the little things that we do every day that build up to bigger changes, and you have to have the patience to keep doing that so that
Mhm.
eventually it happens. And sometimes it happens, and you don't even realize it until the changes have, the gains, the progress,
Mm.
have snowballed in such a way that you are like, oh, suddenly I'm able to do this. I'm able to open that jar that I can open like 3 months ago without like a rubber glove or whatever, um, and that I can reach the can on the high shelf, or I can ride this bike, or I can do that move on the surfboard, or I can ride um, this century and run this marathon. Like I don't know. Like I just think um, that again also is inspiring to just like live your life, uh to keep living your life in search of these wonders,
Mhm.
and it's very satisfying to know that you can do that.
Mhm. Yeah, I find this, for me, it's, I live on a farm. For me, it's tossing bales of hay out to the goats and
Oh,
the ease with which I feel in picking up a 50 to 70-pound bale
I
and
can see you
finding
doing that
suddenly
just
like, "Oh, there's more ease here in
yeah.
something that is kind of a hard and awkward, cumbersome
Yeah, and
movement."
you're doing it and it feels good, and you didn't hurt yourself doing
Yeah.
it,
And
you
and
know?
yeah, and I think that one of the things that the book really really called, and I have a quote here, right? Uh, I don't need to look like a strong man, and neither do you. That strength isn't about. I mean, it can be, and you explore these sort of outward presentations of muscles. But strength is about so much more than that, and it's not always about. It's about building that feeling of capability and that repetition over time.
Right, and physical strength. no matter what it looks like, influences your internal strength,
Yeah.
your mental strength, your psychological strength. I actually was you what you just said reminded me of so I was yesterday I was in the gym and I was lifting and I was doing this deadlift. And this is something that is like relatively new to me, right? All these different kinds of power lifts and um lifting again, like as I'm getting older, I it is so imperative that I do it correctly, right? So I've been
Yes.
learning um, and
Me too.
uh,
I've been learning this the last year too.
yeah, like you did, because it's real easy to hurt yourself when you
Yeah.
start lifting heavy.
I was doing a
And
deadlift
so,
yesterday. So, yeah.
I felt like what's great about it, I thought, not the only thing, but it was like a marshaling of yourself. It's like a
Mhm.
you have to center yourself, you have to have your grip correct, you have to be and I'm closing my eyes talking to you about this because I'm putting myself back in it. You have to be on the foundation, like from head to toe, balanced on your feet, square, your spine is aligned, and then you have your arms, your hands connected to the bar, and then you lift. And when you lift and go straight up, you feel like this central force, like again, like it's this everything is gathered
Mhm.
and um and if you do it right, it doesn't hurt, but you feel like a togetherness, like all of your
Mm.
molecules are coming together and your muscles are all working in coordination in this direction, right? It's like
Mm.
this directional um, up, then down, and it's like it's force and it's from you and you generated that force. And it is like so grounding in all of the ways. Like I don't know, again, like I this is relatively new to me, so I just really noticed it when I was doing it. And it was like this like central line from like the top of my head down like my spine, my glutes down to my heels, right? And it was really cool. Like it just was like and it didn't wasn't that it lasted that long, but I couldn't stop thinking about it and I couldn't stop like just going back to it. And that feeling of centering and grounding and foundation is like, oh, like I'm here, like I'm corporeally here in this moment on this earth, and that's really cool.
Yeah. I love that I could feel the deadlift while you were saying that, and it is a full recruitment of pretty much every muscle in your body at attention
Yeah,
coming
yeah.
together in that moment. And for me, movement has always been one of the ways that I can access presence, and I think that
Me
you come
too.
back to this often in the book,
Yeah,
is that it brings us into the presence and aliveness of this moment and how precious it is in that. And I
yeah.
really love that because I think that presence, perhaps even more so now in our modern world, is more and more difficult to cultivate, and so this is a
Yeah,
place
it's a
where I
really
can
elusive.
access it.
Yes. I 100% agree with you on that. I think we're so scattered, and everything anywhere can come in at us at any moment. And to have some practice that you can return to this feeling of presence is really useful and healthy for us in this very atomized society, modern world that we live in.
Yeah, and I think you do a really beautiful job of sort of showing how much of the science shows that your body knows, right? And this is
Right,
when I
right.
can't find presence here, and it's not that they're separate. I believe that they're one thing, but when I can't find presence in my mind, my body knows the way back to
Hmm.
presence
Yeah,
and how to
yeah,
be drawn into that. I
for
I
sure.
know we're coming tight on time for you, and I'm just so grateful for the book. I absolutely loved it. I can't wait for it to come out and
Thank
for everybody
you.
to have a chance to experience all of the beautiful stories that are in here. And Just thank
Thank
you.
you
Thank
so
you for
much.
writing this. Thank you for
Thanks,
writing Why We
Kate.
Swim. Just a pleasure.
I loved it. Was a joy to talk to you about all of this. So thank you for inviting me on.
Yeah. Well, we'll have links to the book and of your social media in the show notes and
Awesome.
thank you.
Yeah, let
Okay.
me know. Please send along to Marisol when it comes out,
I will.
and we'll talk. I hope
Yeah.
it's sometime soon.
Yeah. Well, I really do. I really appreciate it, and I really did. I found so much joy in the book. So thank you for writing it. And I'll be thinking about a lot of these for days to come. I'll be thinking about whale peduncles
Oh yeah.
and double dutch and
Oh my
all
gosh, we
kinds
didn't
of.
even talk about whale
I
peduncles.
know
That's one of
when.
my favorite parts of
Yeah,
the
the
book.
whale peduncle was I am still we're still recording, so I can kinda wedge this in, but the whale peduncle and the glute of the whale as it propels it out of the water was just one of it stuck in my mind as a description. I'm still thinking about
I'm
it.
so glad it did because it was a mission for me. I think at a certain point I was working on someone had told me about you should look into the whale peduncle. So I did. And I thought, I don't know if this fits in, but I don't care. It's going in the
It
book.
has to be here.
I spent like 2 days writing about whale peduncles. And they were like two of the most joyful days of like writing in the process of writing on muscle. And I just thought, that means something. Like
It's
I
gotta
will
mean
figure
something.
out like how and why it's important. But for now, like whale peduncles, I just, you know,
The
it
joy
brought
came
me such
through.
joy. So yeah,
The
it's
joy
so
came through because I have an enduring image of what it would be like to
oh
ride
my gosh.
on this whale
Yeah, ride
as
on the
it
whale
initiates
peduncle.
its peduncle
We're gonna
to
ride our
jump
own
out of the
peduncles
ocean. Yep,
into the
mhm.
ocean. Yeah.
Okay,
And
well,
I was I'll tell you one more thing about that, which is that
please, please.
I was in the ocean like not right around the time I was writing that, and it was whale season. So like there were a lot of
Mm.
whales breaching, and it was like a crazy like this last season was just pretty amazing here in Northern California. The whales were just really close to shore and breaching repeatedly, and I just loved telling everyone, all my friends in the lineup about the whale peduncle and spreading that joy. And as we were
Yes.
watching the whales reaching, and I just thought, this is why I was put on Earth to
Or
do
is to talk
that.
about the whale peduncle. Well, I think
Exactly.
it also I don't know if you know this, whales, not all species of whales, but whales are one of the only animals that also go through menopause, and whales are just
Yes, I did know that.
absolutely. And when you talk about this is obviously an act of joy for the whales, right? They teach their young
Yeah,
about it.
yeah,
They're choosing to do it. I'm just always struck by the by whales and what's
yeah,
going on there because I think
right.
it's just I think there's so much that we have not dreamt of in our philosophy in a sort of Shakespearean
Mm-hmm,
way about animal intelligence and whales are right up there
mm-hmm.
and this was just
Yeah,
further hoarding my little whale facts.
I'm with you. I think you need to do there's a whale episode in your future.
We've talked
A
about whales
whale
a
POV.
lot, actually. I've talked
Yeah,
about whale earwax. I've talked about whale menopause, and
great.
so I needed this piece about whale peduncles, and I think you're right that I need to seek out a whale episode. Well, on
Thanks,
that note,
Kate.
Bonnie, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will be in
You
touch with
too.
Marisol about the rest of this.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mind, Body, and Soil podcast. If what you found resonated with you, may I ask that you share it with your friends or leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to podcasts? This act of reciprocity helps others find Mind, Body, and Soil. If you're looking for more, you can find us at groundworkcollective.com and at Kate_Kavanaugh, that's KATE_KAVANAUGH on Instagram. I would like to give a very special thank you to China and Seth Kent of the band All Right for the clips from their beautiful song Over the Edge from their album The Crucible. You can find them at All Right on Instagram and wherever you listen to music.